you to DCI, the sponsor of this workshop. And I want to turn it over now to Daniela Middleton, who's going to give us a brief DCI moment. Daniela, take it away.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Hello, Mr. Talbert. I see you saying hello on chat. We're really excited to bring this session to you guys. DCI, otherwise known as Development Counselors International. We can go to the next slide, please. We are the GMCVB's national PR agency of record. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary. I know I don't look a day over 40, so you're probably surprised by that, but we're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. And we're a destination marketing agency that only focuses on destinations across two practices, our tourism practice as well as our economic development practice. Over the course of 60 years, we've worked with more than 500 destinations worldwide, and we are located in all the key media markets, Toronto, Los Angeles, New York City, of course, and then Denver for the outdoor adventure as well as economic development. We are a mid-sized agency, and what I'm excited to tell you, next slide please, is that while we normally work with destinations as our retainer clients, we do have a co-op program that we are excited to be able to extend to the GMCVB partners. So what this means is that as a partner of the GMCVB, and because they are our client, we are able to offer you guys ad hoc services that we normally would never offer if someone just came to us on the side. So what does this mean? We can do anything from compiling media lists to organizing and arranging media appointments. We have a deep expertise in museum marketing, so we can help craft the marketing plans, communication plans. So really we have a wealth of services, and even outside of public relations that span digital marketing, convention and MICE sales, economic development marketing, social media, and etc. So feel free to reach out to me if you're interested, and I'd love to be able to tap in and work with you guys through our partnership with the GMCVB. So you'll hear from me in a little while, so this won't be the last time we get to chat. And now over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Daniela. Next slide, please. So in a moment, you're going to be hearing from a team of wonderful strategists, as Daniela just said, Daniela Middleton and Janelle McKenzie, and then also the Kivvit team, who works with us on the local market. And as we all know, the local market is now more important than ever. We all have a new customer. As we all wait for that international and domestic customer to come back online, we are really targeting that local resident. So Kivvit's going to have some really keen insights on that. Next slide. And then I'm extremely excited to welcome Matt Meltzer and Katie Parker Magyar, two very seasoned travel writers who are joining us here today. And you're going to be hearing directly from them on some of the best practices, especially during this time of COVID. So thank you, Katie and Matt, for being here. Next. And so, as you know, we are the PR team at the CVB. I certainly do not do this alone. I have an amazing team of women that work alongside me every day. Susie Sponder, Melina Martinez, Jennifer Haas, Stephanie Figueroa. I think you have all probably in some way, shape, or form have collaborated with this team in the past. And we are still here working remote, but we are still here. And please feel free to reach out with any questions or any interest in media. Next. So who are we and what do we do over at the PR team at the CVB? Well, in short, we work with the media day to day. And when it's good news, we're working with the media. And when it's bad news, we are especially working with the media. And here you see Bill and Rolando. They are our key spokespeople for the organization. And often you'll see a microphone in their face and a bright light shining on them as our key spokespeople. But very importantly, you are our spokespeople as well. And we very much look for content that comes from our partners, hotels, restaurants, attractions, museums. All of you make up part of that destination story. So I just want to remind you of that because we are here to support you and to shine a light on your stories. Next. So real quick, this slide is really a representation of what we have all been seeing. And unless you have been living under a rock, you have seen that Miami has really been receiving the lion's share of the voice when it comes to the COVID situation for the state of Florida. On any given day, you will see a Miami spokesperson on national television multiple times throughout different networks and different platforms. This has presented a very unique challenge for us as the CVB, but especially for the PR team, as we are in the front lines in talking directly to press. And so the challenge for us is, how do we continue to do our job during the time of COVID and continue to promote the destination in a responsible way? The answer is in a very new way. That's why it's a new day in PR. We're really shifting the way that we do things. Next slide. One of the things that we are leading with is the importance of traveling responsibly. This is a true pivot from the harder sell message, if you will. We are leading with the responsible message, and really a lot of the credit on this goes to you, our partner. A lot of you have shifted business operations. You're being creative, innovative. You're coming up with new ways to do your job, all to combat this virus. And it is our responsibility at the PR team at the CVB to capture those stories and to communicate them to the world. So we really do thank you for all that you're doing, and we want to hear more. We need to hear more. We want to hear from you so we can continue to craft these stories. Next. Another way that we are really circumventing this challenge is, talking about community and the work that DMOs are doing in communities. Here is a story with North Star Meeting Group, where they really focused on DMOs in their local communities. The CVB's Miami Salutes program was featured prominently in this piece. And North Star Meeting Group, as you may know, targets the meeting planner. And maybe this is not really combating, those big CNN headlines, but this is speaking directly to our customer, to that meeting planner. And so we find extreme value in these types of headlines. Next. Another thing that our partners have been doing, and it's been so creative, especially early on, back in April and during the early phase of this pandemic, you all went virtual. You all started getting very creative, coming up with incredible content that our visitors could experience online. And so we captured this, and we were able to successfully communicate it with the media. Here you see the Forbes Travel Guide covered Miami, BuzzFeed, and multiple other outlets. In fact, I'd love to share with you a wonderful piece that ran in Canada in their national morning show, akin to the Today Show of the United States, exactly on this topic. So Ali, take it away.
Yeah, now Miami has a fantastic virtual destination page. So you can check out the Miami Zoo. We've been going to their Zoo Academy, and every day they have a new animal that you can learn about. You can learn about different species. You can learn about zookeeping altogether and talk to a zookeeper. It's very cool. You can also walk through the Wynwood Wall Gallery, which is lots and lots of different graffiti art on the wall. You can meet the artists, find out what their motivations are, and take a virtual tour through the Wynwood neighborhood, which is a very cool area. You can check out the opera as well from the Destination Miami page. And finally, on a Friday night, you can go to Veza Sur, which is a Spanish brewery in Miami, and they have a happy hour live on their Instagram page at 5 o'clock with a different DJ spinning every night. It's fantastic.
I love that idea. Okay, this next one is all the way on the other side of the world. We're talking about...
All right. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for your work. We are here. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your content, your ideas, how you're changing your operations. Please keep it coming. But right now, I want to turn it over to the DCI team for their portion and their keen insights. Daniela Middleton and Janelle McKenzie, take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. My name is Janelle McKenzie. I'm the account director at DCI. As mentioned, we are the national PR agency for the GMCVB. I've been working in media relations for the past 10 years, but what we're really dealing with at this moment as a tourism community is an extreme crisis, and one that has completely turned industries upside down. So as you know, we're all here today, but I'm glad to be here with you all, as it's an interesting time and a maturing period for us as marketing professionals. We really are the leader in marketing places. So our team right now is focusing on staying on pulse with the media trends and maintaining relationships with journalists who act as our true allies with by helping amplify our message to the broad audiences that, eventually will become visitors to Miami, or patrons in your hotel, or customers in your restaurants. And so with that, on the next slide, we are going to share 3 quick ideas to get you thinking more about destination PR and branding on a more national level, but also on a long-term level while we deal with the immediate situation. We'll consider what sorts of stories are trending and work best to get those big PR wins, as we say, for destinations, and how interest has made those stories change at a rapid pace right now. And we'll also touch upon how you should be reorienting your marketing mentality to elevate the destination brand. And lastly, how you can apply this to a more purposeful placemaking, as we call it, through great storytelling. And so Daniela will start us off with the first topic.
Thank you. So when it comes to what works in travel, the travel journalism landscape, we want everyone to remember that what's happening in Miami right now as it relates to COVID has happened around many places in the world. And many of those places are either on their way to recovery or have claimed recovery. Europe is on its way to getting over it. Italy has claimed recovery. China says they've gotten over it. And the New York tri-state area, which was very much in the same position as Miami just 2 months ago, is reporting record lows on a daily basis. I highlight this because there is a general fatigue in the media when we're talking about the basics of the pandemic now. So again, on the macro level, pitching that you have safety protocols and distance experiences are becoming less and less interesting as the days go by, unless they're really unique or you're one of the first to do something extraordinary. So for example, when Louisville's distillery started making hand sanitizer at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was novel. The media attached onto the story, and for the next couple of distilleries that kept doing it, they would get some media traction. But now having hand sanitizer is like having a bed in your hotel room. It's just expected now. So we're calling this the new normal level content, and we really have to continue to innovate. If you're going to market yourself, your attraction, your hotel, your destination to future travelers, communicating on safety is obviously a win and is actually very important. So we're not saying that you should not be including this. It should be widely available on your websites and in your messaging. However, it's not really a pitchable media-worthy story that much anymore. For the media to care about it, it has to be something more than just cleaning and distancing. So a rule of thumb is if you can replace any other name, a hotel name, a restaurant name, or an attraction name into your own media pitch, and they're doing the same thing, then you don't have a good communication strategy to captivate top media outlets. Next slide, please. Instead, we're going to look at an example, an extreme example of what a destination recently did. Barbados, who pivoted, and man, am I tired of that word pivoting, because we've been pivoting for like 5 months now. But Barbados pivoted their tourism strategy with the recent announcement of their initiative of the Barbados Welcome Stamp. To differentiate themselves from other Caribbean nations and destinations that were marketing or are marketing that we're open for tourism, we're clean, we're safe, our numbers are down messaging, Barbados deliberately built a campaign that aligns with the new trend of working from home and what many are forecasting to be something that's going to be ingrained in how we work, remote working. This new initiative, the Barbados Welcome Stamp, targets long-term workers to come live on the island for up to a year. It has scored a ton of media hits, upwards of 750 million media impressions just within Canada and the US alone. The Prime Minister has gotten requests for broadcast interviews from everywhere from North America to Europe to even Asia. And this is a huge win. At face value, this might appear to be an economic development, government, or talent attraction initiative. But in fact, the tourism board collaborated with the local government in this initiative because really what they're doing is calling for longer-term tourists. It conveys many of the same messages that their counterparts throughout the Caribbean are conveying, that we're open for business, that we're safe, but without saying just that. So they have found a really unique way to get that messaging out and to break through the clutter. Next slide.
And I will take it over if that's okay, Daniela. I wanted to also now, oh, can you guys hear? Okay. We wanted to rethink the way we approach marketing now. You know, there is a red light there that might continue some of those travel now stories with the situation at hand, but that doesn't mean that Miami has to fall off the radar. Sort of reframing the mentality so that individual entities within a market focus on playing into an overall brand is really important. No longer is this just the job of the DMO or CVB in the area, but this becomes a shared objective that in the long run will really attract visitors in a sustainable manner, which is the most important part. Take, for example, Paris. You can really find an editorial story about the city any time of the year and people will read it. there's something aspirational that they built as a place, this quality that people always look for. So whether you're reading about a hotel's refurbishment or another museum's new exhibit or anything like that, armchair travelers will still read the story about something happening in Paris because it just has that gravitas. So the best part is that Miami has the unique product offerings to do the same. So at this time, maybe your hotel is welcoming, you know, homeless community, or creating box lunches for children, or offering patios so that people can social distance in a safe way, things like that. These are the stories that we can tell the media right now that position Miami not as just a place to come visit, but as a place that is interesting, innovative, community driven, you know, all those terms. And that's the brand you really want to build up upon right now. It may not be the only component of your brand identity, but it's helping to create a solid bit of what we like to call constructive news right now. This is laying the foundation for recovery that is actively fighting the negative news that's pervading the country. And so making a conscious shift in approach by doing so, this thinking and technique will not only be pertinent for right now, of course, but it's going to be helpful for any future crisis situation that prevents visitors from physically coming to your destination. So if it's, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's second wave of COVID, whatever it may be, and travelers drop off again, this helps create the mindset of the marketers in the region to remain on the radar. So on the next slide here, an example that we'll share is with Visit Huntington Beach. One of their brand pillars is sustainability and environmentally friendly practices. When the pandemic hit, one of their attraction partners, the Bolsa Chica Wetlands Reserve, noticed a positive impact on their wildlife in the area. So they used this as a story to showcase the great work that they are doing as an organization. But when the CVB heard about this, we jumped on it to amplify the efforts because it spoke directly to the brand pillar and was uniquely Huntington Beach. That was the best part. So while the call to action wasn't a visit this attraction right now because it wasn't safe to do so, we still landed some really great feature placements. You'll see a couple of them snapshotted here, you know, that really helped paint a picture of what an eco-friendly region could look like. And that's what audiences will remember and associate with Huntington Beach when it's booking starts to pick up again, they're able to think about Huntington Beach top of mind. And next slide, please, for Daniela's gonna wrap up.
Yeah, thirdly and finally, and treating Miami as more of a relatable place and less of just a travel destination. We really have the opportunity to be more purposeful in how you think about the community and how we portray the community to the national audience. So it's not just about pitching hotels or attractions and restaurants to the media saying, look what we have, come visit or come when it's safe. But it's instead finding the stories about maybe perhaps the underdogs or the social movers, the diverse owners, the diverse workers, the sustainable efforts, and other thematics that are going to interest travel journalists beyond just the come visit us. Embrace storytelling, which means embracing the characters that make your place your place. Next slide. Take, for example, the GMCVB's Miami Shines initiative. So this is something you guys are all intimately familiar with. We have seen great traction with the national media when we started pitching this last month. And we're continuing to leverage the stories within the Miami Shines campaign to the national media. And to that end, keep an eye out for some storytelling entity that you always have, which is your residents. Your residents are your key assets. Kivvit, who's going to chat after our presentation, they're going to present their take on the local media, but they have some key insights about residents that can be applied to the national media front. Further, what this also can do, and this goes back to an open discussion that U.S. Travel Association hosted a few weeks ago, there was a cry from tourism entities and hospitality partners that KPIs are not looking at residents and how they feel about welcoming visitors or how they feel towards their own destination, but really the KPIs now are about COVID numbers, COVID stats, when is it safe to travel, when is it safe to get on a plane, but local residents are waving their hands saying, hey, guys, who was there eating at your restaurant, you know, going to your local attraction, shopping at the boutiques when there were no tourists? It was us. So help unlock our voice. So you have your residents there, and these are, as I say, the key people that we want to tell stories about. They are what make Miami unique, and they are what make Miami really be able to have a spotlight in the national media. These are a few ideas and pivots that we're recommending that we've seen work positively in the media, and we've seen travel journalists really hang on to these stories. And we're going to hear more about that from Katie and Matt in a little while. But we want to say, and Janelle had pointed this out, this is not just an immediate change just right now for COVID. We're actually recommending that this is something that we embed in future communication strategy. We really feel that this storytelling aspect is going, it's always been important, but now, we really have to embrace it as a core strategy of all of our communication efforts. We've all heard that we need to be nimble, we need to pivot. So we hope that some of these insights that we chatted about and we presented today will be useful for you guys as you plan your communication strategy moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. It really is a new day in PR. We are doing it all very differently. And I just want to say, I vote for retiring the words pivot and unprecedented after 2020.
Yes.
We must never use those words again because they have been used and abused in 2020. Thank you DCI for your collaboration, your teamwork, and your presentation. So now we're going to switch it over to the Kivvit team. As Daniela said, the new customer is that local resident. As we all hang on and wait for international to come back and domestic to some extent, targeting that local staycation market, that regional market, the drive market has become so important. And the Kivvit team works closely with the CVB, reaching that local market for us. So they have some really, really keen insights. So I want to welcome Kelly Penton and Taylor Cavazos. Ali, you can, I think, move on to the next slide. And welcome the Kivvit team for their presentation. Kelly and
yes. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We are so excited to be here with everybody today. My name is Kelly Penton. I'm here with Taylor Cavazos, my colleague. And as Jennifer mentioned, we are the proud partner of the GMCVB, managing corporate reputation down here and working with local media. We wanted to start off our presentation with our first slide, which is really a recap of the stories that have gained traction locally over the last month. And I'm not sure if you can see that some of the headlines and the outlets there. We use our insights to pool which were the top news articles that had engagement over the month of July. Some of the takeaways as we look at this slide are the Miami Herald continues to be really a key source of information for the community, with the top engagements by far on this one article. And the interesting part about that article as well is that it is about not only about COVID-19, as the majority of the headlines are, but it's also related to tourism, and it was about Bahamas closing its borders. So a few other key takeaways just from looking at this is there are still some stories that are cutting through the clutter of COVID-19 related news. In this case, it's really more about crime. And the second story here that gained a lot of traction was in regards to the Miramar boy that was found by himself without his family, which a lot of us locally have been seeing a lot about in the news. That was a big story. And there was also a lot of coverage that got traction related to children and cases relating to children with COVID-19. So on the next slide, just other key takeaways about the state of local media right now to keep in mind. Number one is that government orders and policies rule the day. So every time the governor or the county mayor or even some of the municipal mayors come out and announce a new policy, a new change, it really is the coverage of the day, sometimes the coverage of several days. And it's for good reason, because it impacts everybody. It has to do with how we can conduct our daily lives. Secondly, political news still garners news. And I would only add to that news about crime, as we saw in that roundup of the top articles that have had engagement, are still cutting through all the COVID coverage. Thirdly, responses to new policies are really important. And aside from the headlines that we see about new stats, new things happening relating to COVID-19, most, if not all of that coverage includes response from businesses, response from residents, and really those personal stories that relate to what the new policies and what the new data and new news is. And finally, more than ever, being the first to announce a timely and innovative initiative is very important. We are dealing with a news cycle that is changing, sometimes by the minute. And so when, you're thinking about your proactive media strategy, you have to be quick and you have to be timely. And if you are, you have the ability to generate coverage. And with that, we wanted to share with everybody also some big picture tips for communication, if we could. Perfect. And my colleague Taylor will go through these in more detail with some examples, but just top line, going through these bullets. Number one, developing a communication plan and protocol is more important than ever right now. Making sure you outline who your point people are, how you're going to respond to media, and develop your strategies. And within that plan, make sure that you are establishing regular direct contact, not just, I know we're talking about media here, but it's more important now to have a direct line of communication with your stakeholders, your clients, your partners. Secondly, monitoring news daily is also more important than ever. A lot of us do this as part of our regular work, but its importance is elevated because of its impact on our strategies and on our proactive efforts. Thirdly, being proactive. We feel that now you have to be kind of ahead of the curve, be sharing information proactively with media to generate attention. And finally, I won't say the P word since we're not saying it anymore, but being willing to change and being nimble with your strategy is just a key approach that needs to be incorporated into your strategy. And with that, I'll turn it over to Taylor to share some examples.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. As Kelly mentioned, I'm Taylor Cavazos, her colleague, and I work on the GMCV account here at Kivvit. If you would take us to the next slide, we're just going to get into some specific examples, action items you can take to kind of hit each bucket that Kelly mentioned. So the first one we had talked about was to develop a communication plan or protocol. And we thought a great example of this was the GMCVB's 2 industry forums. You can see one they hosted in early March and one most recently in late July. And this was kind of a full circle moment in bringing key leaders of, the city of Miami, the GMCVB, Miami International Airport, and just being able to safely distance, safely meet, and discuss best practices, especially now as, the news is changing, county orders are changing, municipal orders continue to change. It's so important for us as industry leaders to share top practices and be proactive in communication. A part of that was the hotel destination pledge. So it was originally printed on tent cards to be handed out to hotels just to remind them to be safe, use hand sanitizer, recommend the use of a mask. And again, we think this is a great example because it's efforts that started in March and continue throughout today. In the next slide, we'll go over the second part, which is monitoring news daily. Again, we provided you with some of the top outlets locally that had engagement. There's some national ones as well, obviously, that DCI mentioned, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. And by checking these news outlets every morning, and in addition, checking their social media platforms or the social media platforms of business leaders, other businesses, even county, state, national officials, it just makes sure that you have the most up-to-date information and you're able to share that information with your constituents or your employees. And so in the next slide, and this is kind of the same point, right, in monitoring news, but this is more of an action item. So by monitoring the news every day, we have the opportunity to put forward sources for this news. So in our case, as a rep of the GMCVB, we would put forth Bill, Rolando, Connie, anyone else on the exec board who could speak to the trend. So for example, we have the Miami Herald here, and said, buoyed by American travelers in search of sun, Miami Beach hotels see signs of renewal. So this would be a great thing to track. Miami Herald's writers' emails are there on the article and be like, hi, I saw that you wrote X, Y, and Z. Would love to put forward, our hotel manager or our leader as a source for this story or anything else you need. And this is a great, easy way to share any press releases, safety measures, things like that, outside of, just providing hand sanitizer. Because as DCI said, now is the time to be innovative, extra safe, and to proactively share those efforts with media or with Jennifer, and we can, help circulate that announcement as well. So finally, on the last slide, there's two more, but to also be proactive in utilizing your digital assets. So we had talked about the traction that those virtual offerings gained, similarly by the GMCVB creating one site where all of these Miami attractions from Mocha to using these beautiful virtual backgrounds we're using for Zoom right now, they really took an effort in making their digital assets more robust and utilizing those. Another great example you saw on that broadcast segment was the Win at Home. It was a virtual program launched by the Wynwood Business Improvement District. And by recognizing that they had 150,000 followers on their Instagram, they took everything online. So you saw those live DJ sets, recipe reveals with like Koyo Taco and the chef. It's really just about keeping the destination top of mind, whether that's a business, Wynwood, or greater Miami and beaches. That's really what we're trying to do right now. And then finally, I'll end with this last slide before handing it to Kelly to summarize. But be nimble, right? The P word here, to pivot. And we thought that Miami Spice and that entire program was a wonderful example of being nimble with your strategy. So as y'all know, this year we launched Miami Spice, we, the GMCVB, launched Miami Spice 2 months earlier to make sure that this program was a little longer and more restaurants were included in this marketing promotion program. And then on top of that, as COVID numbers began to increase in April, May, they had a charitable component where it was Meals for Heroes. So they were offering discounted meals to our frontline workers and medical workers. And now leading to today, where we have strict county restrictions for no dine-in, only pickup and delivery at restaurants, the GMCVB immediately rolled out Miami Spice to go. So again, readapting the Miami Spice restaurant program to promote restaurants offering to-go, packaged prefix meals. So this was just a great example of being able to pivot under the popularity umbrella of the Miami Spice program. And, these efforts are all of our combined efforts through Kivvit, RBB, DCI. And so thank you again for being a team. And we hope that y'all can utilize some of these specific action items, both internally and externally in your communications tactics.
Yeah, and that concludes our presentation, Jennifer. So we'll throw it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that great presentation. And we're going to wait till next year to retire the word, by the way. We can still say it in 2020. But so thank you, Kivvit team, for that great insight. So now, next slide, I think we've got Matt Meltzer up. Thank you, Matt, for being here. Matt is from Miami, so you know this destination pretty well because you are local. Matt has contributed to Cosmopolitan, Condé Nast Traveler. He's with Matador Network, Thrillist. So Matt is a very seasoned travel writer, and we're so lucky to have him here today and to hear directly from him on how we should be talking to media. So Matt, welcome.
Thank you. I love that you put Cosmo on there. I think I wrote for them like 11 years ago, but it's always nice to have up there. So
with all those hats that you've got there on display, I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone is interested, please contact me privately. I can tell you all about the hats back here. But thank you all for having me in. Not talking about Cosmo-related stories today. I don't know that those are particularly maybe they are. People spend a lot of time inside, so it could be. But yeah, so talk about how to pitch media now. And I think, Daniela really made some fantastic points. And I would say stole my thunder necessarily, but kind of made some points that I was going to make. But, the thing you always want to think about, and this is always true, it's not just during a pandemic. You always want to think about what people want to read about. Maybe you have a point that you want to make about your business, your destination, but would you stop when you were in your social media scroller or however it is you get news and read it? And if the answer is no, then probably nobody else wants to read it either. And you always need to think about that, because if you wouldn't read about your business or whatever your story is, probably nobody else would. And so, look at what stories have already been written. And if you see a story has appeared in 4 different outlets already and saying, God, I'd love to do a story like that about my business, it's like you talked about earlier, that fatigue, that reader fatigue sets in. And if the story's been out there 4 or 5 times about, and going on to the next thing about cleaning procedures or virtual tours or all these things, people just aren't going to be interested. You really got to be the first or maybe the second out there. If you're not, it's not really newsworthy. Put it on your social media, put it on your website, let people know. But I don't think a writer or a journalist is going to have a whole lot of interest in covering it. If they do, it's going to be a hard sell. Again, always pitch with your audience in mind. Right now, obviously, there's no international travelers, or very, very, very few. And not a ton of domestic travelers to Miami, so it like you say, right now it's drive market, it's locals. What is bringing them in? And I think certainly, there's people that may not have wanted to come to Miami previously. People who had said, God, it's too crowded, and there's clubs and there's partyers and people are drinking till 6 in the morning. Right now, it's not like that. And maybe target those people who thought it was too hectic and too busy and go, no, you can really just enjoy Miami as a nice beach city with great restaurants and great drinks and all these wonderful things, great culture that we have, and really focus on that, because that's a traveler who might not have thought of coming before and might have gone to the Gulf Coast or somewhere else. So I think maybe that's an audience to look at. Understand right now it's tough for everybody, and travel writing is especially difficult because people aren't traveling, and travel outlets don't have the budget, because travel outlets are funded by basically travel brands who advertise in those travel outlets. Well, those travel brands don't have money to buy advertising, which means editors don't have money to pay for stories, which means writers don't have as many opportunities. That is to say that a writer that you may have worked with previously that would play stories for you 100% of the time may just not have that. There just may not be that many opportunities. And again, it depends on the writer. Some people write for outlets that have huge budgets still, and that's great. But, understand that editorial space and budgets are limited right now. So really, it's a much more difficult process to get your story out there because it all filters down. Again, offer something writers and readers aren't getting elsewhere. If someone's read the story before, they're not going to read it again. So make sure that you're offering a story that really nobody else has. I think we talk about this a little bit later, but God, Miami has, if there's one thing we do well in Miami, it's characters. We just, you leave your house and within 100 yards, you meet somebody and you go, yeah, that's somebody you only meet in Miami. I mean, read a Carl Hiaasen book. The guy's made a career of playing up the characters we have. I don't think he made up any of the characters in his book. They're probably all based on real people. And those stories are so great. People love Florida stories. I say Florida is to news headlines what California is to song lyrics. People see Florida in a headline and they're like, this is awesome. And not saying, Florida man necessarily, but if you can find one of those great South Florida characters, and again, we've got millions of them, that's a great story. And maybe you have one who works with your organization. And I think those are some of the best stories you can say. And anticipate questions that people may have. And that's the other one. And again, maybe not so much your safety procedures, but other questions people may have about what it's like traveling to Miami right now. Obviously hot, obviously a little bit rainy, but other things beyond the weather of what the vibe really is there and what taking a vacation to Miami looks like right now as opposed to maybe summers past. Next. So again, story topics of interest, road trips. I cannot stress road trips enough. Every outlet I write for has been like, we're leaning into road trip coverage. This is what we want. Miami is a great place to take a road trip. It's the end of the road. You get there, however you decide to drive in, but it's a fantastic place to drive. And I think even people looking, outside the state of Florida who can get to Miami within a day or two, I think it's a fantastic destination for the end of a cool Florida road trip, and maybe people want to come down the Gulf Coast and across Alligator Alley and end up and spend a couple of days in our city or whatever. But those are really, really huge. And I don't know if you want to do tie-ins to AAA or whatever. I'm not a marketing expert, but I know road trip stories are huge. Again, see what stories are out there. COVID era travel tips you may not know. And the way I think sometimes you can get your people in those stories is to position them as experts. There's a lot of COVID travel tips that have been out for a long time. Wash your hands. Okay, we know that. Social distancing. We know that. But maybe you have some things that your organization knows that others don't, or you haven't seen in the news, or you go, I wonder why they never talk about that. you can absolutely position someone from your organization as an expert in it. That's a great way to get them in a story. And maybe it's not direct promotion, but it certainly keeps you top of mind. Alternatives to international vacations. We can't leave the country right now. Miami, I mean, the joke about Miami is it's like going to another country, right? And I mean, that's part of the charm, is that it's really a very, very international, very Latin, I mean, it feels like you're in a Latin American city. And if you're sitting in the United States and going, gosh, I can't go to Central America, I can't go to South America, but you can come to Miami, which really has a lot of that feel, and you can delve into the neighborhoods and really get that experience. And I think that's a great thing for Miami to promote right now, because I think we are the most international feeling city in the contiguous United States. And gosh, we can't leave. So what a great story. Character-driven stories, I talked about that. And again, we do characters really well. Train trips and other visual stories. I don't know how a train trip would fit into Miami necessarily, but visual stories, another thing we do very well in Miami. Aesthetics, right? Beautiful views, beautiful people, beautiful settings, beautiful everything. And people want to look at beautiful pictures right now. Those stories, big, sexy visual stories, editors are really into those right now. State parks and more road trips. Florida has great state parks. We've got Oleta River and Bill Baggs in Miami, but even the rest of the state, park and outdoor stories are huge, and obviously more road trips. And budget travel. Certainly budget travel is always a big one because everybody wants a deal, but certainly now that money is tighter for a lot of people who may even not think they could afford a vacation. Budget travel is saying you could take a road trip. These are the types of things that work. Next slide. So please stop pitching me on it. I don't want to dwell on negativity because I don't want to be that writer who's like, God, I have so many emails about this and that because, whatever. But I think some things opening, a new opening, there's a certain segment of local people. Like I saw somebody from a bakery on here that's opening in November, and that's the kind of thing people want to hear. But a hotel reopening after COVID is not really news to anybody anymore. Again, I put that on your social media, but it's not, no one's going to write a story about it. I get a lot of those. Your sanitation procedures, that's like saying, hey, look, we wash our hands. Yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. And I think it's nice, again, to allay people's fears and have your travel or your sanitation procedures out there, but it's not newsworthy. Nobody's writing a story on what Hotel X or Restaurant Y is doing to comply with sanitation procedures. And I probably get a press release about that a day. Bad news, we got enough bad news. And most of you guys are not in the business of pitching bad news. That's one great thing about travel. But, if it's not positive, I know there's enough out there. And it's not something I think in the travel sector we really want to harp on. Renovations, again, and this has always been true, renovations are never newsworthy. Unless it's something absolutely unbelievable. The fact you change some rooms around or added new rooms or whatever, not particularly newsworthy. Deals you wouldn't read in a headline. Look, I know a lot of people are out there expecting the travel industry to throw them insane deals because they're so desperate for people to come in, but and I know that that's not really going to work for anyone because you can't make money that way. But a free third night is not newsworthy. A free sixth night is not newsworthy. Rooms for under $100 a night in a hotel that's usually 2 or 3. Yeah, all right, that's newsworthy. Here's my test for it. If you wouldn't send it to your friends and share and say, oh my God, look at this deal, we better book this now, it's not newsworthy. And that's how we look at it from a content perspective. So again, if you think you got a great deal because your $500 hotel room's now 300 is still a lot, and there's a very small segment of people that's going to jump on that deal. So it's really got to be eye-poppingly cheap for a deal to be newsworthy. Virtual, there's just a lot of fatigue with virtual. I saw the presentations are great, the things that you all put up earlier, but those stories don't perform from a media perspective. People weren't reading stories about virtual tours, at least from my experience. And Katie may have had a different experience, but after about 2 weeks, editors were saying nobody's reading these. So it's a good thing to have as a promotional tool. I don't know that it's newsworthy necessarily. Finally, entire hotel buyouts. There's like 5 people in the world that can afford to buy out a whole hotel. If you're pitching a publication that Jeff Bezos is reading, great, put that. But your average, news outlet is not going to talk about full hotel buyouts. Is not going to want that story because the audience for that is so limited. So again, it's nice that your hotel offers it, but it's not particularly newsworthy. So that's about it. And next slide, please. And what keeps me up at night? Look, I'm generally a pretty positive person. I'm not too worried about this pandemic. I think we're going to be fine in a relative amount of time. Maybe not next week, but eventually. The only things I worry about is obviously the potential contraction of the travel media market. You read a lot of stories every day about outlets cutting people, closing up. That's obviously worrisome, and it's worrisome for you all because that's less places to get your message out. So that's a little worrisome. How long it'll take for travel to get back to normal, quote unquote, such as it is. I mean, God, we had record travel numbers, I think the last 5 or 6 years worldwide. How long is it going to be before we're getting back to that? As much as I don't like crowds, it's certainly nice to see that, and that increases the market share. Small business survival. I think that's the biggest one for me. What makes Miami so interesting is it's small businesses, because we have these cool little restaurants and shops and all these things from all over the world that you can go visit. And if those go out of business, then what are you left with? Well, you're left with, no disrespect to H&M or Starbucks or those places, but they're places I can get in Greenville, South Carolina, another lovely city. But again, small businesses are what make a place so cool. And I think I really worry about that not surviving. And that maybe the golden era of travel is over, and we'll look back 10 years from now and go, God, remember when you could just fly to Europe for like $400 and it was great? You just went and you didn't even think about it. And I hope those days come back, because it really adds so much to the world. But I always say, always stay positive, because the only thing that you can really do and control is your attitude about it. And if you're negative, then it becomes a self-defeating prophecy. And again, I'm not trying to be all Tony Robbins here. I'm gonna stop here, but I will say there are certainly things I worry about, but all in all, I'm really not worried. I really do think Miami, look, people have always wanted to come to Miami. We've been a boomer bust city since, they dredged the swamps in the 1900s. We've had real rough times. We've had real great times. And if there's one city that always bounces back, assuming we're above water, it's Miami. So I'm not particularly worried about it. Anyway, thank you guys for your time. Oh, I love Katie's picture there. It's a waterfall.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Hey, listen, I don't think our president and CEO, Bill Talbert. I know he's listening, but his tagline is, "We are in the good news business." So we are right there with you on positivity. And the virtual thing, I think there was a very small window of time to get in on that with the media, and it was very early on in the process. I think we were able to do that, but I think you're right. Now, I think we need to get more creative and come up with new angles. So really, thank you for that insight. I want to shift it over now to Katie Parker Magyar. Katie is a seasoned writer. She has contributed to Forbes, Business Insider, among others. Welcome, Katie. Katie, you recently wrote a story for Forbes, the 15 Black travel writers to know now. Actually, it was just shared on the chat thread. I really enjoyed that. Thank you for putting that out. I learned some things as well reading that story. So thank you, Katie.
Thank you. And thank you guys so much for having me. I've actually met Matt on a trip before in Grenada and really value his insights. And we disagree a bit on virtual travel, but I'm going to echo some of those points too and try to go through everything as quickly as possible and be conscious of time here. But thank you for the kind words about the 15 Black travel writers stories. I think just talking about the types of stories that are doing well now, I think the two biggest movements, just culturally aside from just travel, is obviously the global pandemic and the sort of political landscape that I think does sort of impact as well, like the stories that are being told, but also the Black Lives Matter movement has driven people to be more interested in like the voices that they're reading. And there's more of an emphasis now too, I've noticed I've always focused on locally owned businesses and covering the Caribbean a lot. That's always been a highlight, but I think now people are really looking to see sort of travel that in a way gives back, or spotlighting, as Matt said, character-driven stories. So just thinking for Miami, I wrote a piece for Forbes that was like on visiting all 50 states, what I learned. And one of the points was, you don't need a passport to discover different cultures. And I wrote about Little Havana. And, there are these spots in Miami that, not to get too off topic, but the 2020 Super Bowl performance with Shakira and J-Lo really highlighting the Latin American culture that does exist in Miami. And I think that those stories are always interesting, but particularly even more so now. I guess just like a quick overview about how my career has been affected. So I'm a journalist for all the publications you see there. I've been lucky because for Forbes and for Trip Savvy, I'm a contributor. And for the quarter newspapers. So I'm still writing like 10 to 12 stories a month, and I've worked, I mean, I love South Florida. I love Florida in general, and I've worked closely with the different visitors bureaus as well locally, and obviously with Visit Florida too. And I found you guys to be a really great resource. So just, I guess, a couple quick notes on travel journalism. I found that my readership has actually never been higher, and I think it's because everyone is addicted to their screens. But that's something to keep in mind. Longer stories are doing well, and longer interviews as well. And I don't want to dismiss the role of influencers, but I think that has been harder because, you know, they have to physically be there, and there's sort of the sense of, you know, there's sort of pushback against brands. So some influencers have revealed themselves to be more of brands. And what's nice with journalism, and particularly travel journalism, is it's SEO optimized. So if you have a story in Forbes about, you know, like these are the most undiscovered spots to visit in Miami, if someone's visiting a year from now, they can still see, they'll still be able to see that later. Sorry, I just got a weird notification on my phone. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Okay, cool. And maybe I'm an eternal optimist here, but I do think that people being locked up makes people more curious about the world. And I know just from readership feedback, and also from my own personal perspective, like being quarantined at home, I think has made people prioritize travel when they can travel again. And I think that, to the same note, that if you're going to read a story about New Zealand, you're not immediately going to be booking a flight to New Zealand. I think Miami, rightfully so, has capitalized on the sense that it's closer, so you can book a weekend trip. But for everyone who's reading an article and booking a trip immediately, a lot of people are sort of seeding those ideas for later. So I think that the nature, I guess, pitch-wise, I think that the nature of travel is going to shift a bit, which I think will be good, actually, in terms of just like refocusing travel to Miami and viewing it in a different lens, because I think that there's going to be more of an emphasis on extended stays and less quick trips. Because if there is more at stake for boarding a flight, then it's almost going to be like, I think that the value has to sort of outweigh the idea that maybe you're going to get COVID-19. Inshallah, you won't. And then also because more and more people are working remotely, and that is projected to continue through the rest of the year, people now have more flexibility. And then I guess to quote what Matt has also said a little bit is that there's going to be an emphasis on road trip travel. And I think that Miami is in a really great position here because, I mean, to give some background, last spring, I flew into Miami, drove across the Everglades, went to Marco Island, then up the Gulf Coast. And there are so many spectacular road trips that you can take in Florida, but also like right out of Miami, like you have America's Caribbean right there with the Keys. You've got America's Everglades. Sorry, I always think in headlines. With the America's Amazon with the Everglades. And also like there's this romanticism, I believe, around road trips in Florida, partially because of Tom Petty. And maybe that's a personal thing, but I promise you I could sell that through. And I think that's something that's interesting. And I also think, just in terms of pitching, I know we mentioned different cultures, but I think that, you know, depending on what happens in November, the country is really divided right now. And I think focusing on the character-driven stories, the things that unite us, if we're going to continue to not be able to travel abroad, I think people are going to want to be focusing in different areas in the U.S. And I think showcasing the diversity as a nation is a place where I see opportunity. Another thing, and I know Matt mentioned small businesses, and this goes into the character-driven stories. You know, travel gets dismissed as 1% luxury, but really it's a primary driver of GDP. I mean, I'm obviously thinking a lot about the Caribbean, but in Florida as well, and finding ways to support small businesses. And the idea that, and I think this also goes into pitching, like, what are the guardrails in place where you can sort of be a responsible traveler, but also recognize that by not traveling, and I mean, I think the New York Times canceling their travel section over people getting angry about, you know, you could book a flight now and fly in 2 years was a little bit alarmist, because travel is like a really necessary part of our economy, and also it builds empathy for other people. And I don't think the industry is just going away. Another part of it too is outdoors travel, which I think touched on with the Amazon, the Everglades. All right, let's go to how to pitch media now. I would focus, and I can't stress this enough, like, I mean, as a freelance journalist, like I'm really grateful for all of the contacts and all the information I'm always receiving from PR publicists, like email multiple times a week if there are multiple updates a week on travel. So if there's anything that's shifting with like airlines, hotels, I think that this is where working with different partners is really important. I think I mentioned this in topics that are not as interesting, but I don't want to get like story idea of a hotel renovation or reopening if that's not tied into the larger what's going on with the Miami and Florida tourism industry. So I think making sure that everyone is aligned there, because now everything is so tied together into a broader perspective of travel that all pitches should sort of tie back to that. Evergreen story ideas. So bucket list trips I found have done really, really well, because people are now like, okay, I used to think I could go to Miami for a weekend and now I just can't, or I used to think I could do this. And people are now, I believe, plotting more about what they want to do. And also due to, you know, the fiscal devastation in our country, I do think budget travel is going to be an element of that. And I don't believe we're quite there yet, but obviously when travel deals begin to happen, like say you book this flight and you can, something I always write about is our hotels that if you book a stay and then you have to, and you reschedule, but you don't cancel, you sort of lock in a price. So this idea that you can lock in prices and that way you're sort of like giving money into the travel sphere without having to actually commit to, like say you book a flight for February, but February there's an outbreak or whatnot and you can push it back. I think that's something that's really interesting. Responsible travel, I mean, I found that there's never too much of that because everything is changing all of the time, and due to our country's setup, like it changes a lot city by state by region. So I think that's something to be sharing whenever there's a new innovation. I know certain hotels are doing, you know, they're doing temperature checks, or their employees are getting tested 3 times a week. And sometimes, I mean, I feel less safe going to a rest stop in Maine where people aren't wearing masks than I would feel safe in a luxury hotel where at least I know everyone's temperature isn't above 98. So that's something. Also interviews with experts to seed interest in things. For example, obviously, I'm thinking of like Art Basel in December, and I don't know how virtual or how not virtual that will be, but for me, sometimes when I want to travel somewhere, it's not that I read like 10 reasons to go. It's like I will have read something about like a really cool bartender or the art scene in Miami, I think, and like the street art. And I mean, honestly, the cocktails and like Miami Vice stuff, or like the fashion. And I think that what's great about Miami is that you do have a place in the cultural imagination, and there are things that people are already associating with Miami. So it's not like you have to like break through, but there are ways that you can stay in the news, and particularly in the travel news, without having to be like 5 reasons to visit now. And then in terms of reopening deals, I know Matt said like hotel buyouts aren't as great a thing, but like for me, writing for Forbes and some other like Architectural Digest, like I do think, as we mentioned, like what's going on with the economy, like income inequality is going to be worse, but it also means that people who can afford ultimate safety and luxury are going to want to spend it. So if it's like you can rent this villa for like a week in Christmas for X amount, like there are readers who want to know that, and that would work. Please stop pitching me on the standalone updates with hotels and museums. I found actually that virtual travel, depending on what kind of virtual travel it is, if there's some sort of philanthropic element to it, like I did a story on like safaris that you can go on from home in like South Africa, and that did really well. And part of the reason that it did well too is because you're getting local guides. And with Miami, like, I don't know if you could do like a street art tour, or like different things like that. People are bored. That it depends, yeah, having a sort of unique angle. What I found actually works very well besides virtual is more like imaginative travel, I guess, like books to read, movies to watch, songs to listen to. I think everyone's gone through their Netflix queue. So like any sort of things and ideas about media that you can consume that relates to Miami is also a way to like stay top of mind. And as a travel journalist, what keeps me awake at night, you know, I'm very much an optimist, and I feel confident that the need for travel, particularly now when everyone is like immensely depressed at home, you know, isn't going to go away. But I think just having like total transparency when you do host journalists again about like, you know, what you expect from coverage, and like sort of more, I'm delusional. I think everyone I work with is my friends, so I haven't really had this issue, but sort of like, here are the kind of stories that I can publish now, because the worst case scenario is you host someone and then they publish a story and they get flamed online for being insensitive to the time period. So I think like getting coverage on those angles, and that's it.
That was a lot. Thank you, Katie. Thank you. That was really great insight and so important. I bet that for all those PR folks on the call, we are all hearing things that we have experienced personally and working with the media directly. And for those of you who may not work with media day to day, maybe you learned a thing or two about, just exactly how very nuanced it is when we pitched media and when we're talking and trying to sell our story. So we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you, our partner. I want to thank DCI, Kivvit, Matt, Katie. Thank you for being here. We're out of time, but I know there's been a lot of questions and chats, and we're going to go ahead and respond to that individually. So thank you again for your time. Have an amazing day, and make sure to tune in later this afternoon. I think we have the next one at 1 o'clock. The social media and content team, no doubt, they're going to be showcasing some amazing work that they have been doing as well. So thank you all. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.